Optimus, it obviously is a humanoid robot. It weighs much less and is much smaller than a car. So you could expect that in high volume, and I'd say that you also probably need three production versions of Optimus. So you need to refine the design at least three major times, and then you need to scale production to sort of the 1 million unit plus per year level. And I think at that point, the cost, the labor and materials on Optimus is probably not much more than $10,000.
Yeah, and that's a decade-long journey, maybe?
Basically, think of it like the Optimus will cost less than a small car.
Right.
So at scale volume with three major iterations of technology, and so if a small car, costs $25,000, it's probably like $20,000 for an Optimus, for a humanoid robot that can be your buddy, like a combination of R2-D2 and C-3PO, but better.
Yeah, I mean,
and honestly, I think people are going to get really attached to their humanoid robot because, like you look at you watch Star Wars, and it's like R2-D2 and C-3PO. I love those guys.
Yeah.
They're awesome. And their personality, and all R2 could do is just beep at you. Right? and couldn't speak English. You need C-3PO to translate the beeps.
So you're in year 2 of that. If you did 2 or 3 years per iteration or something, it's a decade-long journey for this to hit some sort of scale. And
I would say major iterations are less than 2 years. So
okay.
It's probably on the order of 5 years.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 to get to 1 million units a year.
And at that price point, everybody can afford one on planet Earth. It's going to be that 1-to-1, 2-to-1. What do you think ultimately, if we're sitting here in 30 years, the number of robots on the planet versus humans?
Yeah, I think the number of robots will vastly exceed the number of humans.
Vastly, yeah.
Vastly exceed. You have to say, who would not want their robot buddy? Everyone wants a robot buddy.
Hey guys, welcome back in. That was a familiar voice. That was Elon Musk on the All In podcast last week, I think it was. And there he was talking about humanoid robots, and we've talked about humanoid robots and robots in general, and how their robotics technology is exceedingly, or it's speeding up, to say the least. If you follow tech Twitter, tech Reddit, and follow robotics and how fast they're moving, from where we were at 3 years ago to now is pretty remarkable. And in that time, there's been a number of new humanoid robotic companies that have started up within the last few years. And Tesla, it is one of the leaders in robotics, as far as we know, and they stand to have a significant market share of the humanoid robot space when the time comes. And he's talking about within 5 years producing 1 million robots a year. Now, there are going to be all these competitors. Obviously, there's some pretty remarkable competitors out of China that are going to be competing with him and other domestic humanoid robot suppliers. But if Tesla alone is producing 1 million of these robots a year by 2030, well, that's 5 years. 5 years ago was 2019, so that's nothing. We're going to be living in a different world. So, and then of course there's all these questions of practicality of humanoid robots. It would be nice to have someone to do your dishes for you, but at what point is it too much, I guess? Is anybody asking that question? If you've seen the movie WALL-E, where everything is automated, the Disney movie WALL-E, there's a point in that movie where everything's automated and people are just sort of floating around on pods and they're all super fat and they have nothing to do because everything's automated. Is that the kind of future we're going for? I don't know. But those questions should probably be asked. There are times I have to get on my roof to take care of something, and the older I get, the less I like doing that. So, if you had a humanoid robot that could do that for you and eliminate the risk, that would be great. And I could think of a number of those tasks that I would not want to do that are dangerous. So I'm sure they'll be marketed in such a way at the outset. And then, if they scale in such a way like Elon talked about, they're going to become super affordable and it will be second nature. But it's just so hard to wrap your head around seeing, humanoid robots accompanying, a random person to the grocery store or the market to get groceries. I mean, we'll start seeing that within the next 5 to 10 years. It's just wild to think about. So let's talk about China a bit. If you follow news out of China, you would know probably that China's economy has been struggling the past several years. Attempts to jumpstart the economy have proven futile for the Chinese government. The struggle for the Chinese economy really has a great deal to do with the implosion of their real estate market. Of course, I am speaking generally here, but the downstream effects of that struggling real estate market have sprawled. One notable area of struggle is amongst young people, specifically those 16 to 24. There's been a number of articles over the past few years about how that specific demographic is struggling to find work. I'll link to a more recent New York Times article in the show notes. The specific article gives a good overview of the problems facing China. I'm also going to pull heavily from a Reuters econ podcast that came out within the last few weeks. I'll link to that also. But I think that article and that podcast would be a good guide in helping you understand what's going on in China right now and how the U.S. is potentially poised to follow in those footsteps. Because we talked about it here that, any contraction in the economy is a green light for companies to cut overhead. Typically, that overhead is labor, and typically they look for efficiency tools to replace that labor. And if you have a contracting economy, companies are going to do that, and that's what's happening here in China. So back to those 16 to 24-year-olds. This demographic grew up on the tail end of a booming Chinese economy. They saw their parents and their grandparents flourish in that economy, and they've completed their various levels of education and are ready to enter the workforce. The problem is that the workforce has contracted and looks like it's going to continue to contract further. It's become such a point of contention that in 2023, new graduates were told at a specific university that, quote, "you must not aim too high or be picky about work," end quote. This is a direct quote from a university president to 9,000 graduates at a commencement ceremony in June of 2023. I mean, imagine hearing something like that in the U.S. or anywhere. I mean, you just can't fathom hearing those words come out the mouths at a college graduation. It's just hard to wrap your head around. Just for context, China's rate of growth this year is going to be about 5%, which would be welcomed by most economies, but for China, it's not that great. And the unemployment rate of those 16 to 24, not currently in school, is sitting at 17%, or almost 1 in 5 people. And this year we'll see about 12 million new graduates in China. So just over 2 million of those folks won't be able to find work if that rate of unemployment continues. So what was at one time a stepping stone of sorts for workers were those jobs within the gig economy. So think Uber drivers, food delivery, those sorts of jobs. Those jobs are not viable right now because the market in China is saturated with folks trying to do that kind of work due to lack of jobs elsewhere. So an already tough competitive, job environment is going from difficult to impossible. And if it's not impossible, it's about to be. And more on that in a moment. The number of ride-hailing drivers in China has jumped from 4 million to 7 million over the past few years. That's quite the leap. and that cannot be a good indicator for the economy. And so, as a result, discontent has started to grow online, and China, being China, is trying to squash that discontent and scrub the internet of that discontent. But it's going to be more and more difficult for them as this demographic and others grapple with unemployment, with little to no hope of finding employment. As some of those folks in that demographic are turning to documenting their unemployment on social media as a means to generate income. Others, or grifters or scammers as we should call them, have started to take advantage of those new graduates by posting jobs and collecting recruitment fees for jobs that don't exist. And to some extent, this problem is of China's making. So this is from the New York Times, quote, "Government crackdowns and tighter supervision have subdued once vibrant industries such as online education, technology, and real estate, fields that young people had flocked to for jobs. Starting in 2020, Alibaba, one of China's biggest technology companies, was a target of government scrutiny, and last year, the company reduced its employee headcount by about 12,000, or about 5% of its workforce, according to a report released by the Chinese Academy of Social Studies." End quote. So, to be fair here, that's probably only one cog in this giant machine. And there's obviously a number of concerns here, but one obvious concern is that, as China goes, so goes the rest of the world to an extent. I mean, our economies are obviously intertwined, and it's in the best interest of the rest of the world for China's economy to do well. But what may be more important here is that China is doing a trial run right now for what's going to become reality for everyone else. So one of the ways China is trying to jumpstart the economy is by heavily investing in emerging technologies, namely AI and robotics. To some extent, China is cutting off its nose to spite its face, because while AI and robotics stand to create enormous wealth, at least for some, the efficiencies gained by AI and robotics will put many people out of work, exacerbating an already unsolvable problem. And let's just stick with the gig economy here for a second. We've already talked about how Uber drivers have grown from 4 million to 7 million over the past few years, which in and of itself is not a good indicator for the economy. But what happens when you throw driverless cars into the mix? There's a company in Wuhan, China, called Apollo Go that already has driverless cars in operation and hopes to have 1,000 robo-taxis operating in Wuhan by the end of the year. So what does that mean? It means the prices for transport will be driven down further and further, and those trying to make a living by driving will be forced out altogether, if you take this to its logical conclusion. And I haven't come across any direct feedback on the ground from the drivers and how they feel about the driverless cars, but you have to imagine in a country where competition was already impossible that the situation will come to a head at some point. If driving or delivering is your only real option and that's taken away, what do you do? What's your next play? On that Reuters Econ World podcast, the editor, Kevin Krolicki, also talked about the Global Robotics Conference that was held in China a few weeks ago and just how advanced humanoid robots are becoming. When will these humanoid robots begin to take away, production jobs in factories? And that will be just as soon as they can comparably perform the tasks that humans do. And if you've been paying attention, we're only a few years away from that, just like Elon said at the top of this episode. So for those folks who could have made it into the workforce, that option won't be available. And it'll be interesting to see how the government handles this transition over the coming years and decades, and if folks get fed up to the point of action. Also, in that same podcast, they talked about how driving instructors in China are being made obsolete in real time as driving instructors are being replaced with driverless cars and AI. I would guess that driving instructors don't represent a large part of the economy, but for those who depended on it for income, it's obviously everything. And what becomes of them now? Also, a note thrown in by Kevin Krolicki on that podcast is that there's some speculation that the last generation to ever drive is being trained to drive right now, meaning that driverless technology is at such a place right now that the time is coming where it will be the exception to drive and not the rule. And that will obviously be easier in a centrally ran China, and especially in urban areas. It will be much more difficult in rural areas and in the West, or at least it will take more time to implement to get to a world where humans don't drive. But make no mistake, it's on its way. So a solution or an end for those, 16 to 24-year-olds facing unemployment issues is still a very big question mark for the Chinese government. I would contend the more that China embraces AI and robotics, the more the problems will proliferate and begin to hit folks outside of that demographic. And what happens when, normally safe mid-career jobs are made obsolete by technology, and we see a real wave of folks that are simply unemployable? I think we'll begin to see some civil unrest if there's no solution presented. And if people start to lose everything they work for and have no hope of an income, things are going to get real very quickly. And just to wrap this segment up, from that Reuters podcast, that editor, Kevin Krolicki, he ended it this way, quote, "Going to a good university, getting a technical degree, an engineering degree, or computer degree is no guarantee of economic success in life. What you have to do is not buy a house, not get married, and not have kids to have a margin to live through tough times that could be coming. It does feel like what's happening here is economic history happening in real time." All right. So this summer, there's been a ton, and I mean a ton of hype on tech Twitter, tech Reddit regarding the imminent release of OpenAI's next model, so ChatGPT 5. If you've listened to this podcast or followed OpenAI for any length of time, you probably know that there was a ton of hype late last year around the time Sam Altman was fired and then rehired around a new model called Q-Star. This was thought to be the model that showed the next big leap in capability. That hype eventually died down, and there's been whispers here and there from folks associated with OpenAI that things are about to speed up tremendously. Sam Altman himself has intimated that very thing on several occasions. It's generally thought that GPT-5 or Q, whatever it's being called, has been in existence for some time, but OpenAI has been holding it back for fine-tuning and safety reasons. In the meantime, OpenAI and other labs have released variations of their latest model. These variations are cheaper and more efficient. Also, in an interview in August, the CEO of OpenAI Japan said that the next iteration of GPT-4, and GPT-4 is what we have now, he's calling it GPT-4 Next. He said that next iteration from OpenAI would be 100 times more powerful than GPT-4. So, same model, but 100 times more powerful. It's difficult to even make sense of that if you've used ChatGPT. But per the CEO of OpenAI Japan, the release will be 100 times more powerful, and they expect that release to happen at some point this year. So all the while, these more efficient models of GPT-4 are being rolled out. There's speculation that GPT-5 is waiting in the wings for release. And if GPT-4 Next is 100 times more powerful than simple GPT-4, what will the leap to GPT-5 look like? Now, I am making some assumptions here, I should say, assuming that the various project names that have come out do represent the jump to GPT-5. And they may not, but we are assuming for the sake of this podcast that they do and are. So GPT-5, or Q, as it used to be called, has been changed to Project Strawberry. So we're assuming that Project Strawberry is the same as GPT-5. It may not be. It may be a different iteration of GPT-4. I know that's convoluted, but there it is. So at least Tech Twitter and Tech Reddit think that that's the case based on some ominous posts from folks within OpenAI. Anyway, this is from a Reuters article, I think from back in early August or July, about Project Strawberry. Quote, asked about Strawberry and the details reported in this story, an OpenAI company spokesperson said in a statement, quote, we want our AI models to see and understand the world more like we do. Continuous research into new AI capabilities is a common practice in the industry, with a shared belief that these systems will improve in reasoning over time. The Strawberry Project, formerly known as Q, was already seen inside the company as a breakthrough. Two sources described viewing earlier this year what OpenAI staffers told them were Q demos, capable of answering tricky science and math questions out of reach of today's commercially available models, think GPT-4. A different source briefed on the matter said OpenAI has tested AI internally that scored over 90% on a math data set, a benchmark of championship math problems. Reuters could not determine if this was the Strawberry Project. At an internal all-hands meeting, OpenAI showed a demo of a research project that it claimed had new human-like reasoning skills. An OpenAI spokesperson confirmed the meeting but declined to give details of the contents. OpenAI hopes the innovation will improve its AI models' reasoning capabilities dramatically, the person familiar with it said, adding that Strawberry involves a specialized way of processing an AI model after it's been pre-trained on very large data sets. While large language models can already summarize dense text and compose elegant prose far more quickly than humans, the technology often falls short on common sense problems whose solutions seem intuitive to people, like recognizing logical fallacies and playing tic-tac-toe. When the model encounters these kinds of problems, it often hallucinates bogus information. AI researchers interviewed by Reuters generally agree that reasoning in the context of AI involves the formation of a model that enables AI to plan ahead, reflect on how the physical world functions, and work through challenging multiple-step problems reliably. End quote. So there you go. While GPT-4 is operating at an undergraduate or even graduate level as it relates to language or prose, it has struggled with more complex logical problems. So think left brain, right brain. The promise of Strawberry is that this will be resolved or capabilities will be enhanced significantly. I should say here in the spirit of objectivity that much of this is conjecture from the reporting to the models. No one knows what exactly is going on outside of an OpenAI and these frontier labs. Ominous posts on Twitter or Reddit lead the tech world to believe that, this next model or even AGI is imminent. And if base GPT-4 to GPT-4 next within the same model is 100 times more powerful than GPT-5 or Strawberry, if the two are synonymous, would be a massive advance. But back to those ominous posts on Twitter promising advanced capabilities, there are those like NYU professor Gary Marcus who say large language models have plateaued and that the current makeup of technology is such that significant advancement cannot be had. And moreover, he states that these ominous posts you see on the web are simply meant to keep interest high from investors. The promise of a world-altering technology just around the corner will be a way to keep investors on the hook. And I said all that to say it's impossible to know exactly what's coming and when it's coming. OpenAI has teased advancements for this year, and Sam Altman himself has said that OpenAI would steamroll the competition in regards to their technology and capability. It's difficult to dismiss that given that OpenAI has delivered and continues to do so. One other point that makes me think a major release could be imminent is that OpenAI, along with Anthropic, met with federal entities late in the summer to showcase some of their technology. And that makes me think the technology may be more consequential than Gary Marcus would have us believe. Also, both OpenAI and Anthropic signed agreements with the federal government or the U.S. AI Safety Institute for research. And that agreement allows the U.S. AI Safety Institute to do research, testing, and evaluation on the newer AI models. So that's something I think positive too. And maybe if OpenAI and Anthropic, took that step to meet with the US AI Safety Institute, maybe they know that this technology is consequential and they don't need to be the only ones looking at it. Let's hope that's the case. All right. Lastly, this week, this podcast will drop on September 12th. And on the same night, September 12th, on ABC, Oprah will be holding a primetime special on AI with Sam Altman, Bill Gates, FBI Director Chris Wray, and a tech influencer. I have no idea who he is. I'm probably showing my age. In any case, the program is meant to highlight the potential and the risk of AI. There's already some backlash around the program from some claiming that it's meant to fuel the AI hype machine with little regard for AI safety, but, we'll see. And Oprah is obviously a very big name, but I'm not sure how much she's thought about AI or the implications of it. I'm hopeful that the conversation will be substantive, but this primetime special is probably not meant for this audience. It's probably meant for the biggest swath of folks available, the biggest, the largest demographic available, and not meant for people who follow AI closely. But, maybe Oprah will surprise us. And, thinking about it now, it's probably unfair to judge Oprah in this regard because she probably is making this, more generically for the public, and good for her because this is consequential for everybody. So it would be nice to see someone, if not Oprah, grill Sam Altman on the risk involved with AI and not, allow him to take or to respond flippantly to questions. So think about the future of work. Obviously, this podcast focuses heavily on the future of work or work disappearing in the future at the hands of AI. And so I would like one time for somebody to ask that question to Sam Altman and for him not to reply flippantly and go into, we're going to have to think really hard about that in the future. It's going to take input from everybody to solve this problem. Yeah, well, people are starting to lose their jobs now because of AI, so a solution now would be great. So enough with the abstract answers. People, when this really starts hitting them, they're going to want something more concrete and a little less abstract than, we're all incredibly creative people and we'll find something to do. That's not going to mean very much to people. So hopefully it goes a bit below the surface on this primetime special. I guess it's good that this primetime special is happening, but hard questions need to be asked. If you're trying to create a technology that allows you to wield godlike power, and maybe, we haven't had that conversation on this podcast exactly in some time about the potential capabilities of AI in the wrong hands, or even in the right hands with the right intentions could go wrong. Maybe we should talk about that. So anyway, I'll be watching and we'll discuss that conversation on the next episode. So that is it for this week. On the next episode, we're going to talk about China a bit more, mass surveillance, and how the U.S. and the rest of the world is following China's playbook on mass surveillance. And so, some of that is self-inflicted. But seeing more and more every day about facial recognition technology being implemented in the U.S., and it's going to be difficult to go anywhere without being tracked. And, of course, your phone's tracking you at all times anyway, but more on that next time. Thanks for listening. We'll talk next time.